Wars exist as long as mankind does. Some people fight for territories, wealth, and their sick convictions. Others defend their freedom and right to exist. During these wars, there were people of goodwill who chose the right side of history and fought on the side of good. There are dozens of such examples worldwide. Volunteers from Poland, France, and Prussia fought against British Army during the Galling American Revolution. Gilbert Lafayette, Tadeusz Kościuszko, and Friedrich von Steuben engraved their names in American Pantheon of Glory. George Byron, well-known British poet, fought for independence of Greece in the ranks of its army. British volunteers, as a part of Simon de Bolivar's army, fought in South America for independence of the local colonies from the Spanish crown. Volunteers from dozens of countries created volunteer units and fought against the British in the Boer War. Lafayette Escadrille was formed from American pilots' volunteers included in the French Army during the First World War. They continued this tradition during the Second World War. The pilots fought against Germans and Japanese in volunteer escadrilles of British and Chinese armies. Thousands of volunteers from Estonia and Sweden fought against the Soviet Army, which invaded Finland. Hundreds of volunteers from different countries fought in the Croatian Army during the Croatian War of Independence. Ukrainian volunteers fought against Russia and its proxies in Transnistria, Georgia, and Chechnya. And now thousands of volunteers from all over the world fight for independence and freedom of Ukraine.
Double Dominic. I guess I'm from the northeastern part of the United States. I had a pretty good upbringing and roughly almost 15 years over there in the US. About 5 doing an infantry type job, and then about 10 more on the medical side. After that, I was able to go over to the French Special Operations, and that was my first experience in something called a Legion. And then so now, working in Ukraine is my third army. In the United States, I was, fortunate enough to participate in 2 wars, both technically under the global war on terrorism, but I got to go and fight in 2 other countries. And so now Ukraine is my third war and third army, and I feel blessed to be here and help out.
I'm from Bournemouth. It's like a kind of coastal town south of the UK, maybe a couple 100,000 people, but a nice beach, nice countryside, fucking nice countryside, but not much to talk about other than that, like no one's heard of the place. There for school and that, went to university in London, lived and worked in London for a couple of years, moved to another town for a year or 2, went back to London. And then when this started, I've been working in bars for a bit, kind of hopped between jobs. Then I'd been working in a bar for a bit. This started, I was like, well, I'm working in a fucking bar and this is happening and I think I could go there, so I can't keep working in a fucking bar. Like.
Mein Name ist Luca Februari. Ich komme aus Deutschland, ziemlich in der Mitte, Nähe Frankfurt am Main. Kleines Dörfchen, das kein Mensch kennt. Momentan im 1. Bataillon der ukrainischen Fremdenlegion. Brave Kompanie. Vor dem Krieg hatte ich keine militärische Erfahrung, bevor ich hierher gekommen bin. Das kam alles hierher. Bevor der Krieg angefangen hatte, habe ich eine Ausbildung im Einzelhandel gemacht. Supermarktregale auffüllen und an der Kasse sitzen. Ja, der Job hier ist doch eine etwas andere Nummer.
I'm 29 years old. I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada. I live in New Zealand and have off and on since 2008.
Jehes oli mega hobitti ja kauheasti mä en viitti sanoa yksilöiviä juttuja siviilielämän puolelta liikaa, mutta Suomessa mä oon kasvanut ja toki harrastusten puolesta matkustellut nuoren muutenkin. En mä tiedä. Mä oon vaan tämmönen perussälli Euroopasta. Tai ainakin oli. En mä tiedä mikä sit nykyään perussotilas Ukrainassa. Näillä mennään.
Meikän nimi on Lassi ja
Mä oon tuolta Pohjois-Suomesta kotoisin ja 23 on tällä hetkellä ikää. Ja ennen sotaa olin maanrakennusalalla aika pitkään töissä 16-vuotiaasta asti. Ja asepalvelus toki välissä ja Pohjois-Suomessa kasvanut koko ikäni siellä touhuillut Lappi ja Pohjois-Pohjanmaa niin kuin pääsääntöisesti. Ja maanrakennusalan työt alkoi ketuttaa, niin lähdin tänne.
Moje ime je Luka, rođen sam u Hrvatsku Podravinu. Posle našeg rata mama me uzela u Njemačku i onda sam tamo živjel i radil. Završio sam majstora za mesara, onda posle toga sam se u novu orijentiral i dalje išao za strojovođer. Bil sam 4,5 godine u Njemačku željeznicu i onda sam opet išao u školu i onda sam bil kao menadžer u hotel i onda je došla invazija. Onda sam rekao ajde idemo pomagati ljudima kad je situacija slična kao kod nas je bila jedan dan, ali ja sam još bio mali. Nisam mogao pomagati i moram isto priznati da cijelim moj cijeli život uvijek sam htio biti vojnik.
Mi chiamo Yuri, sono italiano, ho 28 anni e vengo da Bergamo. Una provincia, una città, una piccola città, vengo da un paesino in provincia di Bergamo, piccolo paese di 4.000 abitanti. E prima della guerra facevo il camionista, truck driver. This is my job before the war.
I'm Oxide from New Zealand, from Christchurch, New Zealand. Growing up was just, normal civilian life in New Zealand. Went to school, got a trade, did some work, got bored, looked for a bit of adventure, found myself in Ukraine, did some things in New Zealand that, so my skill set's better used in Ukraine than it is in New Zealand.
In the beginning, I was back home in Finland enjoying my IPA beer and these little sweets that you can buy from shop and eating them and watching news from Ukraine. And there was some 18-year-old kids who had given AKs and just half military stuff, half like just regular clothes, civilian, and being like, okay, just go and defend your country. And I kind of stopped like what I'm doing, just looked at it and thought to myself like, at least I can give more like as a soldier than these guys. So why am I so privileged to stay and drink my beer and enjoy my sweets and like live nice while they are defending their home? And I guess the beer didn't taste so good anymore and after that. And then I just went to the Russian embassy and shouted a couple of nahuis and Slava Ukraini, and the next morning I came to Ukrainian embassy and said that I'm coming to fight your war.
I met a lot of Ukrainians in Munich, Germany as tattoo artists. They're funny people, I like them. Some of them was living on our couch. Yeah, it was actually cool, like pretty normal people actually. And yeah, so the best friend from my mom is a Ukrainian citizen. Her name is Victoria. She's working in Ingolstadt, and I don't know, I can say that. And yeah, like I know some Ukrainians, and my mom is like they're really good friends. They meet each other in the medic school because my mom is a medic in the hospital, and this Ukrainian lady also. I know their children, and yeah, like, I will be honest, I'm not here because I know a lot of Ukraine. I'm here because of the idea of liberty, freedom, and also the reasons like can be really good for whole Europe that Russia takes over a huge country with so much human resources and also other resources like Ukraine.
So my motivation to come here was that I heard that there's not enough of educated combat medics. And I got my education from the Finnish Defense Forces. They educated me to become a combat medic. And I heard that there's not enough of combat medics, so it makes no sense for an educated person to wake up from his own bed safely in home while there's people that might actually need your help. And I also heard that there's other Finnish persons here, so I wanted to come and help them the best I could. And then you just can't attack independent nations like that. And you can't bully the smaller one. It's wrong, I think.
Following the media coverage of what was happening here in Ukraine, an unprovoked attack against a peaceful nation, the attacks against civilian population, combined with the fact that I've always wanted to go serve in the armed forces, it was a very easy decision to come here.
Well, I joined the army to like try and help like defend people and fight for them, but I never got a chance to go into combat in the Canadian Army, which is why everyone that I did, became a soldier with. That's why we joined, to be deployed. See action, of course, as well. And that didn't happen. After I got out of the army, I went back to New Zealand, and I found out about the Legion. So I thought maybe I can, I can try and help them. So I went through figuring out how to come here, and yeah, just to help, defend innocent people I see being killed. I don't really personally care about the Ukrainian government, honestly. It's just the people.
Motivation, I learned, I'll be honest, I thought that Ukraine was much more homophobic and not accepting and kind of traditional and regressive than it actually is. And then I learned that nobody really gives a shit. For the most part, like, people might be homophobic, but, it's no worse than anywhere in the West. And I was like, okay, it's not going to be as bad as I thought it was. And the Kharkiv offensive was happening, and, the Kherson situation, and I was like, okay, they can fight back. This isn't going to just be 2014, but the borders moved west, right? And obviously south from Crimea. Like, the Ukrainians are taking ground back. They want to win this fight. They're in this fight for the long term. And they're going to do whatever it takes. They're going to get every inch of their territory back, no matter how long it takes. And at that point, I was like, right, I can't sit around here being comfortable at home in the UK anymore. Like, I'm going to go and help. Because if not now, then when? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not an 18-year-old. And there are people that are a lot older than me here, but I was like, okay, this is the point where I'm going to go and help. And so I did. And here I am, almost a year later.
Well, when I saw what was happening on the news and stuff, it felt like the right thing to do. I couldn't just sit by and let things like this happen. It didn't feel right. Plus, I knew that I could have an impact here. The things that I'm good at in New Zealand weren't appreciated, but here in this situation, it's a valid skill set to have.
The point there was like, I definitely go. Because like, young and healthy, like, I can shoot. Like, I'd shot a fair bit before, which like there's much more to the job than that, but it's a I would say, a reasonable framework basis for it, like reaction to fire and basic like squad level movement and shit, like we did in school. You know, so like there was some degree of understanding. I think, well, if like 50-year-old guys with like kids and are having to do it, and our countries are not doing anything, then like, what's keeping me here? Fucking nothing. So.
For me, that was a bit unconventional because I got into the Legion last year in October through a friend of mine. And back then, the registration process, it was a lot less structured than it is now. So it was really just, if you were recommended to the Legion by someone who knew you, there would have been no problem. You could just tell people, yeah, I'll forward it to my platoon commander, then you come to our HQ, you sign your contract, and that's it. So that's how I got in there. So I got in there because a friend of mine told the Legion that I was a medic and I had worked with him in Bakhmut before. My platoon commander was not quite happy when I told him that. That might have been a bit of an overstatement. When I first got here as a civilian, I could have definitely used the training. Definitely. I got very lucky not to get killed on my first mission, which was about 7 days after I signed my contract. And I was also very, very lucky that I had a lot of very qualified people around me who helped me get to the point where I could actually be a decent soldier and do my job well. Right now, with the reworked training process, I think that it's a lot better because by now every single person who comes to the Legion now will have to go through a minimum of 1 month of training before they're even assigned to any combat platoon or combat battalion. So for the first month, all they will do is training, training, training. Which I think is a very good thing because we had a lot of situations where people like me came here, but then decided that there was no need for them to actually improve on their condition and on their behavior. And it has led to a bunch of very good people dying. And personally, I'm a bit tired of dragging out the corpses of my friends because some idiot who doesn't know how to do his job decided that he wants to play soldier.
I didn't know how to join the Legion. There wasn't any information or website like the Legion has now. I was in New Zealand. I thought maybe I'll call a Ukrainian embassy in New Zealand, but New Zealand doesn't have one. So I called the Australian Ukrainian embassy to ask how could I, if I have enough experience, to even join. I think they sent me some email or whatever, some form I filled out. And then the only thing they told me is, here's this point on the Polish-Ukrainian border. You need to get there yourself and find this tent. So that's what I did. And it's expensive to fly from New Zealand to Poland and then down to the border, and it's a lot of money. And coming here and doing it twice, I'm very in debt.
It was pretty frustrating, honestly, because we were kept in the dark. So we didn't know how long we were going to be waiting or what it was we were in for. Being in that barracks, waiting around for a month and a half was probably the worst part of Ukraine, honestly. Because it was like just the boredom and the frustration of like, we're here, we're paying for everything, bleeding money, because at that point we're not considered part of the military, we don't have contracts, so they're not allowed to pay us. So we still have to pay for a lot of things ourselves, like equipment, food, and all sorts of stuff like that. So we were bleeding money, running out of money, and then finally we get paid. We get to our units and everything got better from there. But yeah, they told us that when we finally get to the field, we're going to be wishing we were back in training. But I think I'm the opposite. I'd rather be out there working as opposed to be sitting around doing nothing. You know, within reason, obviously. I wouldn't want to be out every day continuously, but if we could go out at least, I don't know, once every 2 weeks for a few days or a week at a time, that'd be good. 1 week on, 1 week off, at least once a month. I don't know. Feel like we're contributing more.
I decided to move from Ukraine in this year, in February. I take a bus, you know, Flixbus maybe. I take a Flixbus from Milan, and later, 12 hours, I join in Lviv, Leopoli. We say Leopoli in Italiano. Nothing, without contact. No contact, nobody. I see only video, you have a foreign fighters fighting with Ukraine, for Ukraine, and decide to move it. I join in, I am staying in Lvov for 4 days, and I don't know, I try to find, you know, I go in a military office in the city, and I asked about for join in the army. He said, you know, here is for only Ukrainian people, you are from Italy, you are foreign fighter. In Lvov, I meet this guy, Yaroslav, I remember the name, Slavik for the friend. And he gave me the direction for go to the office and later join in the International Legion. Before to the International Legion, I'm stay 5 months in a Ukrainian battalion named Karpaskasits. And later, 5 months, we deployment, I can say where now, but yeah, in Donbass, Donetsk Oblast. We deployment here with is a unit with all foreign fighter, more guys from Latin America, South America, Colombia. And before to stay with this guy, I don't speak Spanish. And in these 5 months, I start to speak Spanish too. It's beautiful because you know a different culture, and we are all unit for help Ukraine, you know. And later this, I decided to move for the Legion. I know because I speak English too, and I moved for International Legion. And here now is 2 months half. To stay here is a good place. I like so much. I do my job, pretty, I think, good. And nothing, I'm here, man.
So, I think it was March 18th I came into Ukraine. We'd waited, so I left the UK on maybe March the 10th. I'd like come across a couple of Americans online on some forum or some shit who said they were also going, but I got into Poland earlier, so I was waiting for them for maybe the bulk of a week. Met them in Warsaw, realized they were both fucking, if you picture the stereotypical American that likes the idea of shooting a war, so this isn't gonna fucking work. One of them met a girl in Warsaw, not even like a girl that he was fucking, in which case I can kind of understand it, but just like met a girl. I was like, okay, I'm not going. And then the Legion base got bombed. It's like, okay, I'm definitely not going. The other one was stupider and still wanted to go, but was, I mean, stupid. Like, you know, sometimes you talk to someone, you're like, they are mentally deficient. Like, so he got to Przemysl? Yeah. And we were at the refugee camp for a couple of days, like trying to find other guys going through. Because at that point, it was still like, okay, we're in Poland and that's Ukraine. Like, and who knows what's over there, and it's all war and fucking. So find a few guys that are wanting to cross through, and then there was a group of maybe 4 or 5 of us that went to the Legion. They were having like, not recruiting, but there was like a filtering process. And like any guys with that experience are like, no. But met a couple of guys there who had come into contact with hospitallers and said they're taking people with that experience. So Next day, get a train to Kyiv, go to St. Michael's. They have another like speak about yourself and we'll put you somewhere thing. Get put in like a team, which was like a ambulance. So we're in a fucking basement of some hotel there for a couple of weeks. Go back to Kyiv, there for maybe a week. Then go to the hospital in Severodonetsk, there for a couple of weeks. Then that was like as Severodonetsk was getting encircled. And so they wanted to go. And we did, and we went to Lysychansk. But at that point, I was like, fuck this. Like, I don't want to do, like initially, like that was the best thing I could get into. Or the first thing I came across, I was like, I'll do that. But like, getting guys brought in from the front that have been fucked up while I'm sitting in I mean, the hospital got shelled, but like I'm sitting in a fucking hospital behind the lines. And they thought it was going to get encircled. So they're like, okay, we're going. Like, no. So I decided then, like, once I get back, I'm fucking finding a unit. Like, I can't sit with my, like, this doesn't sit right. This is not the kind of thing I want to be doing. So then I went to Van Bahun. We had training for a couple of weeks and then went to Lysychansk, which was all right. Like, it's the same shit as everywhere else. November the 5th, maybe I got here. November 6th, 7th, 8th, I got hit. Was in hospital for a month, broke contract not to go to military hospital. Stayed in Kyiv for a couple of weeks because I still had the stitches in, and so I got the stitches out, went back to the UK. Submitted the thing to like get my passport renewed. I got my passport, came back, and then started the like paperwork to rejoin and got back in April.
Before the war, I really did not know where Ukraine was. I thought it was some part of East Russia or something. I am ashamed to say it now, but so my main motivation for coming here was the military motivation, but also the humanitarian motivation. However, it was only really when I got to Ukraine and I met the people and I saw the cities and I got introduced to the culture and the language that I really started seeing what we're fighting for here and why it's so important that we're fighting for this country, because it is a beautiful country with so much potential that just must not be wasted.
In my country, I don't know. I was in the army in 2014 when things started off. Like I got in the army to go to Afghanistan, but that just ended when I finally got through training and got posted. So me and my whole platoon that I did training with were bummed out, and we got posted, and it was maybe 6 months, and then you know the helicopters flew over Crimea, and our battalion commander gave us a briefing, and we all thought we were going to war in the Ukraine, and that's the first I heard about it. We never came here to combat or got deployed. The only thing that happened was some of the guys from my battalion were sent to the Western Ukraine to train with Ukrainians, kind of as a deterrent. I don't think it worked, but they got to go to another country. Yeah, that's it really.
Started following what happens in Ukraine in 2014 when Russia temporarily occupied Crimean Peninsula, which is part of Ukraine, naturally. And I also followed news what happens in Luhansk and in Donetsk. And I actively followed for example, the battle for Donetsk airport and what happened in Kharkiv. I actively followed those events in 2014 and so on. So that was what I knew about Ukraine.
I kept, for a long time, a pretty keen pulse on kind of global conflict and just kind of following stuff to kind of keep up to date with what's going on. Because, I mean, war is it's the most violent and significant thing that happens, like, politically, right? Like, sure, you can have trade embargoes or different presidents and trade agreements and all this stuff, but war is like the great changer in you know, like a political aspect, right? So yeah, I was aware of the Maidan protests. I was aware of the divergence between what your president said and what your president did. Oh, let's get closer to Europe. Never mind, let's get closer to Russia. And then everyone obviously coming out and protesting with the students and then the kids and the parents and malenké zeliolin Chelevek na Krim. And kind of, I remember tracking, or not tracking, but kind of observing people tracking like Russian VK accounts. And like, oh, this guy is a serving soldier in the VDV, and now he's on holiday in Donetsk. Right? He's a vacationer in Donetsk, but he's an active duty soldier, and there he is standing with an AK outside a council building, right? Like taking over it and all the other stuff that happened. Like, yeah, I followed it for a long time. Obviously, after 2015 with the ceasefire, it's kind of just you were throwing shells towards each other back and forth, and then, oh, we didn't shoot you. No, we didn't shoot you. And yeah, but when February 24th came around, actually, I tracked it on stream for like a week, 2 weeks. I was kind of updating people with what's going on and kind of watching cameras, you know, like the security cameras and stuff that you could see, oh, there's a Russian BMP driving into Hernodar, right? Like, all of the significant events of that first part, I followed in great detail. I regret not coming out sooner. I'll be honest, I was comfortable back home, but the longer it went on in 2022, the more I felt uncomfortable. Like, there are people out there fighting, there are foreigners out there fighting. I have the skill set to go and help. Why am I sitting at home? Why am I sitting at home when my training geared me up to fight this enemy? Why am I sitting at home when, you know, my training put me in the situation to be able to fight this enemy? So, you know, there are people in Ukraine, like I said earlier on, there are people in Ukraine that don't want this war, have no experience of this war. There are people in the military that have never been in the military before that don't want to be in the military, right? Like, at the end of the day, you are your people. Not everyone wants to be a professional soldier, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for those of us that were professional soldiers, and for those of us that it was our job, why are we not helping, right? Like, we've done our time, we've got out, we're now available to come and help. And thankfully, a lot of foreigners have. Could always use more. But, yeah. I regret not coming out sooner.
Before coming here, I knew very little. All I was aware of, it was a former Soviet country. It wanted to join NATO. There was the Crimean War, which when I was in high school, I had to write papers about. So that was kind of my introduction. But besides that, very little. I didn't know much about the culture or the people or the language. I saw maybe like memes and stuff, you know, like Slavic memes. But besides that, not a lot. Just what I'd seen on the news, really.
When I first came to Ukraine, I was expecting everything to be devastated. I was expecting everything to look like a World War II documentary. Tanks driving everywhere, gunshots in the distance, all cities destroyed. So I was very, very surprised when I came to Lviv, and it was a Western city, and it didn't look like a dirty village somewhere in Russia. They do exist here, but so that was a big surprise, and also how much variety there is going from Lviv all the way to the east. How different the cities are, how different the villages and the cultures are, the languages and the behavior of people. I was very surprised by that. I was a bit negatively surprised by how few people actually speak English. Usually on my travels, English was never really an issue. As long as you speak English, you will find a way to get around. Here you're quite reliant on Google Translate sometimes. But all in all, what surprised me the absolute most is how beautiful this country is. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there needs to be said any more of.
I was actually surprised when I got here how similar to the West Ukraine is. It is a lot more Western than I had anticipated. Obviously, there's significant Eastern European aspects to it because it's Eastern Europe. I hate your squat toilets. Just the little ceramic slabs in the floor with a hole. Not a fan of that. Public toilets tend to suck, like really suck. Like it's just a slab of concrete with a hole in the floor and you're lucky if there's any toilet paper. But I mean,
it's part of our national shame.
I think Ukrainians in general, like the vast majority of the houses here are home built, right? Like hand built, like they're built by someone. There's no like big development company that's coming around and building like entire estates. It's this house is different to this house is different to this house. Ukrainians are very, very motivated to kind of do their own stuff. I think not individualistic, independent, but also like if necessary, like they'll give you the shirt off their back. Like Ukrainians are very, very helpful, very kind. The amount of times that I have, with my limited Ukrainian and Russian, just walked up to a Ukrainian and said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And they'll go, and they'll get on their phone and they'll call someone, and they'll be like, "I know a guy." Like that sense of like, I think that's something that we've lost in the West. Just that sense of like, without obligation, just helping somebody for the sake of helping somebody happens a lot more here. Like if I walk up to somebody, if I go home to Cardiff and I walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, can you help me find this?" They'll just go, "Use your phone," or they'll ignore you. And then here it's like, yeah, cool. Let me invest like half an hour of my day that I would have been doing something else to help you because you asked. Like that kind of personal connection, the conversation. Maybe that's just because we're foreign soldiers, but I don't think so. Ukrainians are great, man. I have a lot of respect for Ukrainians.
I'd say, like in the cities, the food is a lot better than expected. Which maybe isn't really what the question's aiming for, but like the standard of restaurant here compared to the UK and what you'll pay for it, like I realize wages are lower, and just the quality of services is, like places are cleaner, architecture's nicer. I like the fucking kind of commie block because you've got much more green space within residential areas, which in the UK, newer buildings, there'll be like a cursory attempt at it. Sorry, I'm looking at but yeah, I like the architecture was surprisingly nice. People, surprisingly friendly, I guess, given the circumstances. It's not like it's a war and everyone's quite pro-army now, and being foreign and being in the army is maybe makes that more so. But to a degree, like the amount of Soviet hangover, I couldn't like pick out specific examples, but like there are times when you think like this is some shit from the Soviet Union still.
The resilience of the people, like despite what they're up against, this massive onslaught of orcs, they're still holding out. Yeah, it's just impressive to see how fiercely these people fight for their country. So I can really, I can get along with that mentality, you know. The Russians fucked around, so now they're finding out the hard way that they can't just bully people.
As a Finn, the most surprising thing about when I came to Ukraine was the friendliness and kindness of the Ukrainian people. Doesn't matter if they're from the west or east, they are always there to help you. They're always so happy and happily coming to assist you if you need help. They're so happily giving food even when you're not asking it. That's something that I was very surprised, and I'm still surprised. As in Finland, we don't have such a thing, such kindness.
We are very welcome here. Like, as soon as a Ukrainian, most of the time, not always, but quite often, as soon as a Ukrainian knows that you're a foreigner and you're here to fight and you're here to help, they're like, "Let me help you." which sometimes is a bit overwhelming. It's like, I bought all of my own equipment. I fundraised a lot of my own equipment before I came here because I didn't want to come here and take an IFAC or body armor or a helmet or, you know, clothing from a Ukrainian. And the way that I perceived it was, if I bring my own, then I don't take from their stores. I'm not saying that there's a shortage of anything, because there's not. It's not like, you know, we're in dire need to the point where there's nothing available and you have to buy your own stuff. No, there is stuff available. But if I didn't bring it, then I would have taken it and now it's available for someone else and there's one spare. Do you know what I mean? So it can be very overwhelming sometimes when we're just here to help, man. And you know, Ukrainians are like, we want to help you. Let us do this for you. Let's help you with this. Let's help you with that. Sometimes it's like, yeah, it's overwhelming. I wouldn't want to say flattering. I think flattering is the wrong word, but there's a good kind of mutual respect. You know what I mean? I think a lot of guys who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan and of course Vietnam, they weren't very well liked sometimes. But like, it's an entirely different aspect here because we're part of the Ukrainian military and we're helping the Ukrainian military. It's not like we're a foreign invader. Like, our opposites from the East.
So only the conscription service in Finland. I was on the Finnish Navy, but on the coastal forces. I was training to become Navy boarding team, like it's sort of Finnish border, how would you say, border guard of the Navy, like to inspect ships and so on, but I was a little nuisance to my company commander, so they kicked me out of that and I just did my service as a regular military police.
In the Canadian Army, I was a mobile C9 gunner. So like the American M249, the Canadians call it a C9. That was my gun. So we operated in a battalion of LAV6s, which are like kind of like your version of a BTR. That's our LAV6. So I was a soldier in the rear. We roll up. As the gun shoots, the ramp drops, I was the gunner, so I'd be the first one out and cover fire while we all dismount and attack with the LAV, and that was basically my role. I was trained to be the turret gunner as well, but that was just to get extra training in a different role. But I was just a gunner.
That's a very good question, you know, and I think this being my third army rather than second, it gives me a lot more insight. I know a lot of people that have other military service and come to Ukraine having it be their second army or their second military experience. They're kind of like rigid in what they expect. Me going from the United States to the French Foreign Legion dues and rep to here, I realized on that first jump, you have to let go of all expectations, you know. If you expect anything or you're hard pressed for any kind of timelines, that will jam you up cognitively and spiritually. You just have to let go of all your expectations and just be as effective as you can against the enemy. What I definitely could tell you I didn't expect was I never expect to have such a great leadership. People like Moomin, Radek, you know, Cartman, you know, great leaders, but especially our battalion XO, our former company commander, Kenobi. Great leader, I would say by far the most combat efficient, awesome officer anybody could possibly ever work with, not just in the Ukrainian military, but probably in the whole world. We couldn't have landed in a better place. You know, working for Kenobi is a great honor and privilege. And I am truly lucky to be working for such a great Ukrainian officer, great dude.
I mean, it's an aspect of leading by example as well. I haven't been here that long, but the reputation of our commander precedes itself. Like there is a reason why this company is known for what it's known for, is because it starts at the top. If you have, a combat shy, I wouldn't say coward. I think that's too reductive. But if you have, like, say, a combat shy or insecure or not confident leader, that trickles down to your platoon commanders, trickles down to your squad leaders, trickles down to your men and women. But if you have that high standard from the top, that high standard is expected to be maintained all the way down. That's the way it works back home as well.
Я просто працюю по принципу роби як я. Щоб ви розуміли, в нас, допустимо, перший етап створення легіону, точніше, перший етап війни з легіоном. Із-за того, що люди просто не розуміли, як працювати з українськими підрозділами, в українських підрозділах, як співпрацювати з нашими офіцерами, які ними командували. Я був як вихователь в дитячому садочку. Я постійно всюди водив підрозділи, я постійно їх водив на точки, на виходи, постійно з ними пересування. Командування повністю за всю роту було тільки на одному мені, тому що командири зводів, на превеликий жаль, на той час не дуже добре працювали, та командири відділень. Напевно, просто люди мене бачили, що я постійно з ними перебуваю в таких, скажімо, стресових або небезпечних обстановках. І навіть цей перший період легіону, що я був ще після поранення, я ще ходити нормально не міг. У мене нема шматка м'яза в нозі, і, виходить, був один з моментів, коли у нас був марш з однієї точки на другу. І ми йшли, повністю все з собою брали, тому що думали, що ми будемо виходити на декілька днів туди. От йдуть легіонери, тягнуть на собі херову тучу своїх речей, при тому, що їм провів інструктор, що вам треба з собою брати, вони все одно взяли надлишок. Пихтять, крихтять, і то збоку я йду собі, посвистую, при тому, що кажу, тільки після поранення, умовно. За себе сильно багато не розкажу, тому що більша частина свідомого життя в мене вже пройшла в армії. Получається, я сам родом зі Львова, навчався в середній загальній школі. Після чого, після 9 класу, поступив в Львівський військовий ліцей імені Героїв Крут, там навчався 2 роки, і після чого вже вступив в Національну академію сухопутних військ, на той час, що була просто Академія сухопутних військ, на спеціальність управління діями механізованих підрозділів. По завершенню навчання, по розподілу попав на проходження службу 54-ту окрему механізовану бригаду, проходив службу на посаді командира механізованого взводу в 1-му батальйоні. Після вже 54-ї проходив службу в Міжнародному центрі миротворчості та безпеки, це той, що знаходиться на Ярському полігоні, на посаді офіцера-інструктора. І на початок повномасштабного вторгнення з нас було сформовано, точніше, інструкторами, офіцерами, сержантами, нами було доукомплектовано батальйоном ФОР. Для тих, хто не в курсі, що це за батальйон, це спеціальні батальйони, які створюються на території навчальних, щось трохи не так. Батальйоном ФОР – це підрозділ, який створюється на полігонах, в навчальних центрах з метою позначення дій противника. Тобто загальна задача моя була як інструктора – це підготовка підрозділів, починаючи від злагодження відділення, завершуючи злагодженнями ротними. Потім вже я брав активну участь в контролі дій підрозділу під час батальйонних та бригадних злагоджень. В ці моменти залучався ОПФОР як умовний противник. І назад до попередньої історії. Нами докомплектувався іменно батальйоном ФОРа по причині того, що там була велика кількість строковиків і що був підрозділ для відправки, на той час нас відправляли в Київ. Офіцери та сержанти, які були інструкторами, ставали на звичайні солдатські або сержантські посади. По факту я туди потрапив, я в званні капітана був командиром відділення, і весь особовий склад, окрім механіка-водія, так само були офіцерами, механік-водій, старший солдат. Повномасштабне, на той період, як я вже говорив раніше, мене направили в батальйон ФОР, ми тоді були зведеним батальйоном. Чесно, голова відмовлялась вірити, що, напевно, тижня-два. Я розумів, що все відбувається навколо нас, але от іменно ця думка, що вже почалось повномасштабне вторгнення Росії, мені то здавалося, що просто, знаєте, якийсь сон такий, з якого я рано чи пізно я з нього вийду. На жаль, гірка реальність. Нас відправили спочатку в Київ, оборона Києва. Ми там на околицях Києва займали оборону разом з підрозділами ТРО. Ми були як другим рубежам. На першому рубежі стояли в нас підрозділ 72-ї бригади. Потім наш батальйон отримав наказ на передислокацію та дали наказ на заняття нового рубежа. Ми висунулись в Гостомель, і в Гостомелі ми вже були першою лінією оборони. Це був березень місяць. 2 березня ми вже розмістили в самому Гостомелі, і 3 березня відбувся у нас перший бій. Чесно скажу, дуже неочікувано, моментами страшно, і результати, слава Богу, в нас вдалося. Тому що район місцевості, який було надано групі, в якій я був, нас тоді було 18 чоловік, і ще плюс з нами було там 8 спецпризначенців з ГУРМО. Ми зайняли оборону на одному з перехрестів. Перед ними обладнали фальшиві барикади з легких матеріалів, там палети з дерева і все таке, тому що розуміли, якщо буде йти прорив техніки, що вони просто через них проїдуть. А друга лінія, яку не було вже замітно за тими дерев'яними барикадами, перекрили повністю дорогу, стягнули туди лавочки, мусорні баки, машини. І воно так і спрацювало. На нас вийшла колона тоді з 10 машин, БМДшки, то була псковська десантура. От вони здійснили прорив, виходить, перші барикади. В них просто знесли, а в другі вони вперлися. І в той момент, коли техніка стала, у нас гранатометники почали з боків працювати і спалювали звичайним РПГ. Було в нас декілька енлавів на той момент, але на великий жаль, що акумулятори замерзли, вони не зійшли. І РПшками почали лупити колону їхню. Арчо почало панікувати, спішуватись, там, воно в паніки метушиться по відкритій місцевості, били їх на броні, били їх біля броні. Стався випадок, що 2 вдалося заховатися в відриті окопи під одною зі стін. Вони туди запригнули, і вони звідти відстрелювалися, вели активний бій, відмовлялися здаватися в полон. В результаті того бою загинув один спецпризначенець з ГУРМО, на превеликий жаль. В результаті вдалося їх звідти викорити. Хлопці так само з спецпідрозділу обійшли з боку, скрізь ту стіну їх просто зняли. 4 березня, 3-го, то що бій закінчився, 4-го видно, на нас трошки Арчо обідалось, воно по нам вдарило чим могло. По нам працювала, я так зрозумів, або була ствольна артилерія, якщо вони на той час підтягнули, або це вже була їхня бронетехніка, яка працювала просто з закритих вогневих позицій. Дрони камікадзе їхні були, і також час від часу гелікоптери ходили на заходи. В результаті чого я був поранений, і завдяки товаришу він мене просто витягнув звідти, бо він по ітогу лишився тільки я і він. І він десь мене в порядку 3-4 кілометрів тягнув за собою. Він там мені розказував, що я відключався, я чесно того не пам'ятаю, що я приходив в себе, кричав йому кінь мене, він, коротше, йому дякую. Якби не він, то тебе не сидів. Це якраз той момент, поки я проходив реабілітацію, знаходився точніше в госпіталі, до мене зателефонували з пропозицією приєднатися до Легіона на посаду командира роти. На той період в нас ще був батальйон спеціального призначення, і було трохи накладно з офіцерами. Не могли знайти офіцерів, щоб вони були англомовні, оскільки треба комунікувати з особовим складом, який мають бойовий досвід. Я довго не думав, там буквально на наступний день я передзвонив, сказав, що погоджуюсь, оскільки я знав, що наш батальйон будуть виводити. Мені, чесно, якось совість не дозволяла, що все-таки держава готувала офіцера стільки-то років, і після того, під час повномасштабного вторгнення сидіти десь просто на полігоні займатися підготовкою, не знаю, мене просто совість загризла. Момент формування, вертаємося знову до істока, в момент формування Легіону я тоді ходив, пам'ятаю, заходили в палатку, жарко, я знімав верхній одяг, і в мене була МТАКовська футболка в стилістиці «Зорних війн», там, де Мандалоріс наступає на космонавта СССР, і збоку на тризубі цей X-Wing, це їхній літальний апарат. Вони подумали, що я фанат «Зорних війн» і дали позивний Кенобі. Тоді на той момент всіх були позивні «Зорних війн». У нас був і Йода, у нас був і Вейдер, у нас була і Лея, при тому, що це був болгар. Так і вийшло. Тобто легіонери самі його придумали. То не то, що я собі прийшов, таки все, буду Кенобі. Носить позивний іменно рота. Це теж при тому, що це я до того ніякого відношення не маю. Це придумали легіонери, причому ж не з нашого батальйону. Там у нас був такий період часу, що ми несли втрати. Слава Богу, що вони були не безповоротні, тобто це були у нас більшості 300. І почали казати «корпус смерті, корпус смерті». Тобто боялись деякі періоди носити, але коли бачили результати роботи, то люди все одно приходили. За весь період ми перебували, виходить, в основному це був Харківський напрямок, в основному. Як тільки ми прибули, це оборона Харкова, потім штурмові дії навколо Харкова, це Веселе, це Тернова. В основному ми там приймали участь в дрібних групах, в противотанкових групах або в снайперських групах. Тобто так, щоб масово-піхотні бої в нас тоді на той момент ще не було. І оборона самого Харкова, і потім, виходить, харківський контрнаступ. Такий досить веселий, цікавий, страшний, захоплюючий момент нашого життя, оскільки тоді ми, як просто локомотив, ломилися тоді, навіть деколи за подіями не встигали. І після того це вже захід в Луганську область, зачистка населених пунктів, відбиття їх. Саме такі, що на російських медіа розпіарений, скажімо умовно, це ще була Харківська область, після Куп'янська бої за Петропавлівку. Ми займалися тоді якраз зачисткою штурму Петропавлівки. І, виходить, там відбулася така подія, що зіткнулися з групою російських спецпризначенців, і в результаті боїв ми понесли втрати. У нас було 2 загиблих військовослужбовців і досить така значна кількість поранених, в районі 5 чи 7 людей. Але в результаті чого група була вибита та знищена. В Росії сильно розпіарили, тому що вони почали продвігати історії, нібито вони хотіли здатися в полон, що вийшов чоловік, його там розстріляли. По факту таких подій не було. Вони відразу вступили в бій, вони відмовлялись виходити з нами на контакт. Навіть коли ми їм кричимо, що зараз приїде танчик, буде розбирати будівлю, де вони сидять, все одно 0 на масу, тільки відстрілювалися.
So my first there's 3 experiences in combat that I will remember for the rest of my life. So first was in Petropavlivka, 27th of September 2022, when we fought against 3 Russian PMP-2Ms and against infantry. They were a mechanized company, I suppose. And the most memorable thing about that day was when someone was yelling for a medic in Finnish. And me and my Irish friend were there with anti-tank weapon. We were listening to his yells. We ditched the anti-tank weapon as we were in front of the group, trying to get a visual to this tank and fire it. But we ditched the anti-tank weapon. We went to see over this fence at where is our friend, and he was lying in the middle of this road, and fire PMP was firing at him. It was firing at our comrades a little bit farther back. And then we made the quick and rapid decision to run and rescue our friend, because no man shall be left behind. And we received fire, intensive fire, but we just ran, grabbed our friend and pulled him to safety. And then next day was also very hard. We took a lot of casualties in form of wounded personnel. So the first time there is a case of multiple wounded personnel. That's a moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. There was a lot of different type of wounds, artillery wounds, shrapnel around the body. One patient had a shrapnel gone through his head, but he was still responding to my commands. And He moved and tried to talk to me. He just couldn't open his eyes. And then that was a hard situation, as the place where I took care of my patients was just a few meters from these Russians who were inside the store. They fortified the store and they were inside there. We couldn't take off from there with the wounded personnel as we received heavy fire. We couldn't go forward as we didn't really know what was in front of us. And I wanted to keep those guys alive. So I only had one option, and it was to treat them there. And third experience was when I got wounded. We were assaulting this small town in Luhansk, and we were in position, ready for movement, and Russians shelled us with cluster munitions 3 times, and then 4th time was when they hit us. They destroyed our whole platoon. 7 men was wounded and 1 was killed in action. And I got some shrapnel into my leg as I was preparing my backpack and ready for movement. Next thing I remember, I was thrown by the shock wave, maybe a meter or 2 into these trees, and I had to relearn how to breathe again. It was very difficult. And then I remember seeing this RPG ammunition backpack filled with RPG warheads on fire. So I made the decision to crawl maybe 20 meters behind to the point where some of our guys were. And I started to apply a tourniquet, and then I just lost the sense of my hands. I couldn't feel my hands. And then I started to feel very sleepy. But thankfully, my brother came to me and applied the tourniquet and probably saved my life. So those are the 3 experiences that I will remember for the rest of my life.
So I've got to think for a moment to find the ones that we don't need to censor afterwards. Because, I would say my first mission was actually quite exciting, because there were at least 4 moments on that mission, at least 3, where I'm absolutely certain I should have died. The first one was as we were walking to our position through a tree line, and all of a sudden a shell explodes like 3 meters next to me. Heat wave rushing over me knocks me to the ground, and I'm checking myself thinking, if I could feel the heat wave, there has to be some holes in me. Not a scratch, not even my uniform had a scratch in it. And our medic just looks at me and he's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "I think so." He's like, "Good, keep walking then." Okay. I keep walking and I take 3 steps and another shell lands this close next to me and doesn't explode. And I'm looking at that grenade in there and I'm just thinking, okay, just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. And we get to the next position and we get to some Ukrainians and we ask them if there's other positions further on down the line, and they're like, there's like 2 or 3 people there, but you should dig in here with us, it's safer. The Russians are very close there, you should dig in with us. And our platoon commander told them, no, we're supposed to go further, we will go further. So we go out of there, and not even a minute afterwards, that entire position just gets completely annihilated by Russian artillery. And I was just thinking, if we had left or arrived there a minute later, we would all be dead. Every single one of us would be dead. So that was quite crazy. And another one that I kind of like was in one of the villages where we were. After my guard duty, I went to sleep and I wake up looking into a bunch of very pale faces. I asked them why they're all looking so grim, and they were like, how can you sleep through this? I was like, sleep through what? And in that moment, a tank shell explodes right in front of the bunker. So much dirt and debris being blown into the room. And I was like, oh, that sounds like war, huh? And it kept going on for another 2 hours. They kept shelling us, like every 15 seconds, one of those shells would land within 5 meters of us. And I just slept through an hour of that, and I was like, how?
So the village that we were based in and had positions in for this year, which has now been recaptured because they gave it to the 32nd and they lost it. So like there's village here and fucking a tree line leading down, and we were moving to take it, November, and like Kraken and Mechanized were moving in as well. And we were holding to wait for the order to move. We were getting some shit either side of the tree line that was getting a bit closer. And then just as we get the order to move, it like lands in the tree line. So I guess they were bracketing it. And there were 12 of us and fucking 5 or 6 guys got hit and 1 got killed. Mostly on like our end of the line, all got some sort of shit and the other end was fine. I think clusters, and it set off our RPGs. So like, I think there was like a secondary explosion from that as well. Which got some.
That was an RPG, right?
No, like cluster. It was a cluster initially, and then RPG, I think. Like, yeah, we look over and there's the RPG bags burning, and the fucking medic's like crawling away with a big fucking hole in his leg, because like he sees the bag, he's like, fuck, I'm getting away from that shit. Cluster, I think. But that's what on the paper it said, like 120 mil cluster, I think. Yeah.
So our last mission, which was my first mission since I've been back in the Ukraine this year, also my first time being on the offensive, my first assault, it was a tree line assault, very early morning, so it was a little bit dark. Stepping up into the assault, that's the same thing, like the shittiest thing I find here. It's walking towards the unknown. You don't know where the Russians are hiding, if there's any, how many, what they have. So it's, it's a little stressful, but it was also like really exciting. We encountered Russians. They're gone. And so we completed the assault successfully. We eliminated the Russians that were there. We held the position, encountered some more Russians who they're also now gone. And we exfilled. We had some really close calls, but everyone's alive. So it was a successful mission.
That is a loaded question. Honestly, you got to give your enemy respect where respect is due. There are some hard fighters, there are some motivated guys, but there are also a lot of guys that are, well impoverished. There are a lot of guys that are alcoholics, and a lot of guys that are drug addicts. And each unit that you fight is different. We fought some Russian PMC groups. We fought some Russian paratroopers. We fought, Russians of every type, Some are a lot more motivated than others. What I will say is that it's almost most of the time when you ask that question, when you see fighters fighting for the Russian Federation, they're not ethnic Russians. If you go 18.5 kilometers in this direction, you will see scores of Russian bodies. But if you look at them, they're like Dagestanian or they're like ethnic Mongols. In the French Foreign Legion, I got to work with a guy called Sergeant Sarantoya, completely crazy guy. They're all direct descendants of Genghis Khan, but you got a lot of like Eastern ethnic Russian, Mongols, and I feel like they're being used as cannon fodder, for like maybe ethnic Russian officers, and you got the Dagestanians and Chechens out there, fighting for Russians. It's when we push through Russian dead bodies, you don't see ethnic Russians. It's almost, it is what it is. I believe most of the Russian fighters that we see, especially the dead ones, they're all been used by ethnic Russians as cannon fodder. I'm talking about ethnic Mongols, ethnic Chechens, Dagestanians, and people from the far flung out, like poor village people, being manipulated and used by the Russian Federation, and it's pretty sad, it's pretty sad, honestly,
In my experience, it's a bit mixed. You'll often have, most of the time, they seem under-equipped, under-prepared, and don't have the will to fight. I think fortunately for me, a lot of the people we've been fighting don't want to fight. We've seen a lot of situations, especially on the drone footage, where one explosion goes off near them, they drop their gun and they start running, like outside of the tree line, completely in the open through a minefield. And it's like, all right, I guess he's done for the day. Continue the fight. Yeah, but then there's some times where there's just so many of them. Like, there'll be 80 of them and 5 of us. And yeah, that's where the quantity over quality starts to take effect. But for the most part, from my personal experience, yeah, they're not the best. They really do the bare minimum that they have to, and then they'll try and either leave, surrender, or they'll just panic and die sometimes. We had one guy where we found him all by himself, way ahead of the other positions, and I don't think he realized that the rest of his men ran away. He was sitting in a bush, and we walked right up to him. He was maybe 5 meters away, fired some shots off. One of our guys, it was a close call, but he's okay. And then we just had like 6 people just turn and open up on this bush. Yeah, and we found him like in the fetal position, still twitching, just riddled with holes. Yeah, it was pretty brutal, but he panicked. And a lot of the time we try and yell out like surrender or rugi ver, put your hands up. But unfortunately they choose to fight, and we're better fighters than them. So we haven't had to fight any special forces yet. That might be a different story. They have a lot more intent. They're a lot more willing to fight for longer and harder, and they have better equipment too. So that'll be a different story. But for the most part, they really don't, the mobilized people we fight don't want to be here. They're really old or really young. They're under-equipped. They don't have a lot of ammunition. They, yeah, I don't know. Mixed bag, I'd say.
Which part they're good? The movement from huge military personnel back in deep behind the zero line, they're good. And we're seeing that the Russians have less and less soldiers, but they're still ready, moving our VDV, so airborne units, from Kupiansk to Bakhmut, and from Bakhmut to Zaporizhia, and up and down, and the Ukrainians kill more and more by HIMARS back. Also, they'll kill the logistics, but they're still like ready somehow to move units, material like gear, from tanks to ammunition to everything, from A to B all around Ukraine. I mean, never underestimate your enemy. be honest, they still have enough tanks. They're still not the best, of course. They still have enough artillery, enough shells, but we are already on the point that, from the perspective from the Ukrainians, the artillery fire from the Russians was the main advantage. But now, after the Russians had this main advantage, we are coming like on the almost the same, even better, because the Ukrainian forces using Western world technology. They're not wasting shells. They're really like, they're drone teams. When you talk of drone teams, they're outside searching days and days for valuable targets. They're not wasting shells on like 3 or 5 guys, what the Russians are doing. We saw that, multiple missions. Because we are clever enough, the jets are coming. We are... No!